Well, hello. This is Alicia, the creator of Call for Convent Reform, and I'm trying out a little bit of podcasting um, because writing is not always easy, especially with the editing process, and I can get a little OCD going back and forth and making sure everything's correct, and even then, and kind of miss something. So I thought it might be a nice change of pace to hear my voice, to kind of hear my story from my own mouth, essentially, and to kind of just do something a little different. So here we are, trying this out, and we'll see how it goes. So I kind of wanted to talk today about how some people in my own life uh, have kind of reacted to my story, to the blog, and then go a little bit into the beginning of just starting completely all over again from the beginning. After leaving the convent, you're like a fish out of water, and it can be a very overwhelming experience. So, recently, I've had some people in my life who haven't been very supportive of the blog. Um, I think, unfortunately, with all the abuse that has happened in the church, with the scandals, with the McCarrick scandal, the pre-scandals, um, there was recently a bishop that um, I can't remember where it was, but just this week that the Vatican investigated him for covering up a sexual abuse that was reported to him, and he is now has been kicked out of his diocese. Bishop Pepner, I believe it is. Um, so I think with all the abuse that has gone on, people aren't very welcome to the idea that there's also abuse happening in the convent. There's also abuse happening in another area of Catholic life, and I know it can be overwhelming, um, and it's tragic. It shouldn't be happening. None of it should be happening, from the sex abuse to the cover-ups to corrupt clergy to corrupt nuns. None of it should be happening. I mean, let's make that very clear. If we're going to be Catholic Christians and live as Christ wants us to, then these things shouldn't be in our church, whatever it is, whatever scandal it is. But unfortunately, we're human beings. We're broken people. The church is made of real living human beings, and um, if we're not completely just enveloped in God's grace and His mercy. Sorry, I'm a little uh, kind of have a frog in my throat today. If we're not completely enraptured in His grace, then we can so easily fall. And I speak on a personal level. I know I'm a sinner from beginning to start. I frequent the the confessional. um, and we need God's grace. We need God's mercy, or otherwise, we don't have anything in us that can keep us from being, a great saintly human being. It's all God. And so when you take that out of the equation, it causes a lot of problems. Whoever you are, a bishop, a nun, a layperson, um, whoever you are in the church, a deacon, doesn't matter. Like if you take that out, if you don't have a strong prayer life, if you aren't taking time away to really ask for God's grace and God's mercy, then you're not going to make it. You're going to make a fool of yourself and of others. So um, that being said, Um, I recently had a priest, a very good friend of mine. I've known him for it seems like forever. Since I was a young teenager, he helped me come into the church, and I told him about my blog, about what it was about, and I already had an inkling that he wasn't going to be super excited about it. But he he wasn't very supportive, and he kind of tried to write off in a way the idea of, that this was a major issue. And um you know I, I guess some people still have this idea of the good nuns who, even though they can be kind of hard on you, mean well and are saintly or and trying to help you to grow in virtue. And I'm sure that's true. There's we can't put blanket statements on people, whoever they are. But I've met too many women that have been in convents, that have been abused, that have experienced the same things that I have experienced to know better. Um, this isn't just an isolated case. If it was, then I wouldn't be doing this blog, just straight out. If it was just my situation, um, then it wouldn't be worth the work and the effort, because it honestly is not easy to come out and to tell your story and to hear other people's stories. And that's a reason why sometimes I personally have to take a step back, because it can be overwhelming. And I have women that are starting to write in and tell me their stories and sometimes ask for advice. I had one woman recently that had a terrible experience in a convent. She had been in there for a number of years. And what happened to her was outright criminal. And to hear these stories and to know that these are religious communities that are otherwise well respected. I mean, let's get that clear. I mean, this isn't, Sisters of, the Spirit of Vatican II. These are nuns that have some respect in the Catholic community at large. They're in the habit. They are considered to be following the magisterium, and in many ways they probably are. But when it comes to how they're treating people in their convent, um, that isn't so much the case. So, um, and I know that can be hard to accept. You think that a woman that goes into a convent, that takes the effort and the sacrifice that is involved in that, and it's a lot. You are leaving everything, your family, your bank account, your friends. Some people sell their houses, sell their furniture. Um, each story is unique, but whatever the case, you're giving up a lot. And you think that the communities that are allowing these women to come in would accept them with loving arms, be Christ-like to them, maybe be firm in some areas. Yeah, I'm a teacher myself. I know that if you're going to form anyone in any sort of way, sometimes you have to be kind of firm. But on the other end, does that mean that you gaslight people? Does that mean that you put people down? Does that mean you um, pretty much treat these women like, if they come to you, uh, you're giving them this uh, great gift, that you're even taking the time as a superior to, talk to these women and to give them your time. You know, then that goes into a completely different issue, but um, that's what you would think, and that's what I think a lot of Catholics think, but unfortunately, that's not the case. I recently had another person in my life who said that when I said my time in the convent was hell, they said, um, well, it couldn't have actually been hell. It's probably unpleasant, you know? Um, and I'm not talking to that person anymore. And a lot of it is because what I was starting to see from this person was the same kind of gaslighting and emotional abuse that I was experiencing in religious life. So, I'm firm in standing my ground, not just for myself, but for all the women out there that have been abused and have received this kind of treatment. It's not okay. And I'm sorry that there is another unfortunate scandal in the church. And it's not like it's a secret. I mean, even Pope Francis has come out and said um, that women are being abused in the convents, especially in a sexual sense. So we know this is going on. We know this is happening, and any kind of abuse is tragic, just disgusting, really, whether it be emotional, physical, but if you take it to a sexual level, then that is just I can't even wrap my mind around it. That's just so sick. But any form of abuse is abuse, and it shouldn't be happening, namely in places where people are claiming to live as Christians, and not only as Christians, but to give their whole life to the church, to God, to to Christ. It shouldn't be happening. It's just unbelievable. So, that being said, I you know I feel sorry for those of you that have been through this abuse, have who have been through this experience, because it's shocking how how many women um have experienced this, especially if they've been in the convent for a few years, then they really start seeing it. So I would just say that, for those who have experienced this, who have people in their lives that aren't supportive, you know, just stay strong. And I'm doing the same thing because it's like another form of gaslighting. Really, I hate to throw that word around all the time, but if I'm telling you, um, especially if I'm your friend, if I'm telling you that I went through a terrible experience that has, really broken me as a person and um, really is on a level that is unchristian, um, that is just unacceptable for a religious community, then you should be supportive. You should hear me out and not try to talk me down from what I've gone through and the experiences that I've had. But unfortunately that happens. So um for a lot of years people didn't want to hear about the sex scandals. But covering things up, covering scandal up, we know we know it doesn't work in the church. We want to keep doing it, and we want to keep hiding these things, and we as a church we kind of criticize and point fingers at people that are pointing this stuff out on a regular basis instead of addressing the issue. What should convents look like? I mean, think about it. What should an actual convent look like? How should it run? How should it? how should the sisters interact with each other? You know, should they be treating each other like they're robots without feelings? Should they be putting each other down? Should they be constantly criticizing others? I mean, is that a Christian community of any kind? Of any kind. You tell me, if that's how you're living your life in a convent, is that Christian? Is that how Christ dealt with people? Right? I mean, we just celebrated Divine Mercy Sunday. We know Christ is just overflowing with mercy and love for us. Yet, too many women in the convent, especially superiors, especially novice mistresses, do not show that same mercy. And it's really sad. um really is. So stay strong, pray. um you didn't make this stuff up. You know what happened, you know what you lived through. And people can say what they want, but we know the truth. So there you go. So I wanted to go a little bit into what happened when I left the convent. uh just because I know a lot of women go through this, for better or worse, mostly for worse. So again, when you enter a convent, you give up everything. And I mean, pretty much everything. I mean, I was allowed to keep my guitar, but it was considered community property. Some books, of course, my documents. Most of them they kept in a file somewhere, like my degrees and that type of stuff. Um, uh, I had like rosaries and crucifixes I was allowed to keep. Um, and then, of course, like all my personal items, like underwear and that type of stuff, I was allowed to keep because you have to wear that stuff. Um, but most of the items, I mean, I pretty much gave a lot of stuff away, a lot. I was for months, I would say I was constantly making runs to, you know, like thrift stores, taking them boxes and bags of stuff that I was just getting rid of, and getting rid of clothes and jewelry. So, it didn't go into like a security, um, any type of secure place. Some things I gave to my parents, but most of it, went. And so when I came home, I had to start from nothing. I had no car, I had no bank account, I had no phone. Uh, I barely had clothing. So what I did have that I can kind of recall was I had two blouses. Now, these are kind of clothes I had worn in the no in the postulancy, so they had them on hand. So two blouses, two skirts. I think I brought my two pairs of shoes, my guitar, my personal documents, maybe like a few books and things. Um, and they went through everything. They were right there when I was packing to make sure. In fact, I put in the chaos of trying to pack within a few hours to leave. Um, because I was to make the story very short, I was told the morning of February 9th that I was leaving. Um, and I could still wear the habit because I didn't have any clothes. I could still wear the habit and live with them. So, and right after that was dinner. So I'm going to dinner and it's kind of awkward because I'm like I was just told I was going to leave. So of course I'm kind of emotional and feeling a lot of things. It was a mixture of dread, just absolute dread of what was coming next, and just freedom, just absolute freedom. Like that's the word that kept coming to mind, freedom. So I could go into that, but I'll kind of stop there for right now. So I immediately called my dad. I didn't even know if he would let me come back because he was pretty ticked off that I had left, and he's not Catholic. My family's not Catholic. I'm a convert. So my dad was saying for years I was in a cult, which, I kind of was, honestly. And he was very upset that, I couldn't talk to him when he wanted me to. And so he just cut off communication. He couldn't handle my leaving. He just blocked it out of his life, really. And so I'm like, great, like I don't even know if my dad's gonna let me come back. So I called him. At first I had a hard time getting a hold of anyone. I went to dinner, and um, sorry for a little poppy thing coming up on my computer. Um, I went to dinner with the sisters. It was a very somber dinner for me. And I afterwards, I didn't have to worry about work anymore. Otherwise, I always had a job that I had to get done at a certain time. So I wasn't really concerned about that anymore. And so I ran right to the phone. I mean, I just wanted to leave. I didn't want to stay there for a few days or a few hours. I just wanted to leave. So I called my dad, my parents, but my dad in particular, and he finally answers the phone and he says, what's wrong? And I just start bawling, just absolutely bawling. Um, I kept on all those emotions because you're not allowed to really show them in the convent, right? You're not supposed to just like cry in front of their sisters. So I was keeping that all balled up, and it just came out like a flood, and I could barely speak. And I finally, after a few minutes, got out that, I had been very depressed and anxious. And the sisters and this is how I put it at the time, because, I'd been with the community so long, and he never blamed the community, right? So I said the community and I agreed that I should leave. That's how I put it. If you asked me that's how it went down today, I would have a different story. But that's what I said. And my dad, God bless him, he's like, I will be there. It was at noon, and it was about a 3-hour drive, almost exactly, to get to Canton. And he's like, pack your stuff. I will be there in 3 hours. Um, I love my dad. He has always been we've always been very close. And, despite what happened while I was in the convent, it was very, very difficult for him to cut off communication, but he made up for it in a lot of ways that day. So, yeah, so we're going through all my clothes, all my stuff, and the two of the superiors were right there every second of the way, and making sure I didn't take anything that was community property. Um, just unbelievable, right? Um, so it started in my room. We went through all my stuff in my room, throwing stuff into my luggage cases. And then I had some stuff in the basement of the mother house, some of the bigger stuff, like my guitars. And I did have some things that my mother had given me because I was always into jewelry making. So I had those things as well. And yeah, at one point I remember putting a book into my case, and I wasn't even really thinking about it. I just had it for so long. I just, didn't even think about it. But it's actually, the communities. And right away, my novice mistress said, "Oh, doesn't that belong to the community?" I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I guess so." And she like took it right out. I mean, it didn't even matter to me at that point, but it's just like whatever. Like I mean, that's how petty it was. Um, but with their help, I got done in 3 hours, and I left on pretty good terms. I mean, I was thanking them for helping me to get ready, and um, you know, and we had done it, and we had done a lot in 3 hours. And when I left that day, I had my blue skirt on, my white blouse. This is stuff I wore when I was a postulant. And then my hair was a mess. It was absolutely a mess. And I asked them if I could have a scarf or something because I'm like, I can't walk out of here like this. And so they gave me this like winter weather set, and I had a hat. And so I wore the hat. Um, so, well, I have to stop there because I guess I can only record for 30 minutes. So I'll kind of stop there for right now, and then I'll pick it up, um, and then come back and kind of finish my story for you. So I hope this is working out okay. I'm not a great public speaker, but I'm just meaning for this to be pretty casual and kind of a conversation. Um, so I'll come back in a minute. Thanks. Hello, everyone. This is Alicia from Call to Convent Reform, and in part one of Fish Out of Water, we talked a little bit about those who are not always very supportive of the story of ex-nuns who have left, and the abuse that they have suffered. And then we went into some of my own story, which I know will resonate with a lot of ex-nuns because they've gone through the same sort of thing. So it's just to recap real quick. Um, I was told the morning of February 9th that I was leaving. Within a few hours, my dad had come and picked me up, and I left with very few items. So, um, I think I told you that I had my guitar, I had two skirts, two blouses, I had my luggage, I had my personal documents, and I was given $400 that I was told I didn't have to pay back to the community. Um, and I mean, $400 is $400, but when you're starting completely anew your whole life, it, in hindsight, it does seem a little, not a lot of money, right? So, um, I ended up in, uh, what happened is I had that money. Uh, I made it last for well over a month, which was a little difficult because I had to buy gas, my own food. My dad did take me shopping the night I came home, and so I was able to get clothes, which he paid for because I didn't have anything to wear. And of course, I didn't want to wear all my ex postulant clothes because that was a little weird. So he did do that. But it's really for those who have been through it, it can be very difficult to get back on your feet after you have left the convent. And for some people, it takes longer than others. Uh, and that's just the process you have to go through. And it's not a judgment on anyone, but some people take longer than others, and some of it can be out of their control. If you're dealing with a lot of emotional or psychological issues from what has happened to you, then of course that's going to take longer. And in my case, when I came home, I was severely depressed. So I mean, severely. I can't even I can't even put into words how bad it was. And I just felt like I was going through the motions every day, and I didn't even want to do that, but I still felt compelled to kind of follow the the timeline, the schedule of the day at the convent. So I was constantly cleaning, doing all this weird stuff when I really just needed a break, but I couldn't get it out of my system. I felt like if I was sitting down watching something or doing something leisurely, I felt, because of all my years in the convent, I felt like I was being lazy, that I wasn't, contributing enough, in various ways. So it was very difficult because of that aspect to even take a break and to kind of just step back and relax. So, and then at the very beginning, I did follow a lot of the same prayer regimen that we had followed in the convent, which helped. And I think I really needed that at that point in my life. And excuse me, I was very blessed at the time because my sister was working at an assisted living facility, and she was able to get me a job within 3 days of leaving the convent, which was incredible. Um, it wasn't a great job. I got it because I had a background in being an STNA. I'd taken STNA courses. I had worked at the nursing home that the sisters ran, so I had that background. Um, and I'm not an STNA. I never took the test, but they didn't require a person to be an STNA. Um, so I got that job. I took it, and um, I worked in that field for 3 months, which was it was good to have a job and to have money and to be kind of getting off of my feet, but at the same time, it wasn't what I wanted to do at all. I really didn't like working there. It was just not a very good environment overall. So, but that was huge. Just having a job, having a paycheck, and because of how things go when you're first starting to work, it takes a while to get that first paycheck every once in a while. And so it took me about a month, and um, yeah, that $400 had to stretch that whole time, and it it was rough. There's some rough moments there, but I made it through. So, um, but landing a job wasn't that difficult. Landing a job that was just something to do in the meantime wasn't that difficult, thank God. Um, but family, I mean, I had left my family for 5 years. I mentioned in the last episode that, my dad had pretty much cut off any communication with me, and so there was this odd kind of tension at first. I mean, I think everyone one was glad I was home, but it was almost like, you know, it was just different. Like, just, before leaving, I was able to kid around with my family and be more relaxed with them, and there wasn't much of that at first. And um it was different because I had been in this very restrictive environment for so long. I remember it was like the first week I got out of the convent and had gone home, and I thought about doing something. I can't remember what it was. And um I remember thinking, like, right away, like, "Oh, what will the sister think if I do this?" And I mean, that was how, uh that's just how I was eventually more or less trained to think because everything you did was watched in the convent, everything. And it dawned on me at that moment that I was in a place where people weren't going to judge me for some silly little act that I did. It might have been just as simple as taking a nap or something. Because if you did anything and you got caught, and the sisters ran off to the superior to talk to her about what you did, you would pretty much get in trouble, and um, they would might say things like you were disobedient or whatever. So that was big. Just getting back in the routine of having a job, driving took a while to get used to because I was a driver in the community, but there were large spans of time that I didn't drive, and I would just be pretty much at the nursing home all day. Um, so it was almost kind of frightening because I was a really good driver because I just because of where I would drive when I was in college, I had to drive through rush hour traffic to get to school on a very busy freeway where I live, and so I kind of learned how to fend for myself on the freeway. And all of a sudden, I'm back behind the wheel, and I feel scared just to go down a normal street. It took a while. So there's just a lot of things that I had to get reacquainted with, and that can be very, very difficult for a lot of religious because it's like the title of this podcast. It feels like you're a fish out of water. It feels strange going into a convent because there's so many rules and traditions, and you're learning all this stuff, but it's also when you get out, it can be overwhelming because of how different it is. You don't have people telling you all the time what to do. I remember being on a social media page just for ex-religious, and one of the ex-religious saying that she had trouble making choices when she went out to eat because for years she had been told what to eat, when to eat, where to eat, that she had a terrible time just making a simple choice like that. I didn't really have that problem. I think to some extent I did, but some people have a really hard time with that, just making a choice, period. Um, I had to start my own banking account, which was strange because I didn't have any credit history. And of course, the bank's like, why haven't you had a banking account in so many years? Um, so I had to kind of pretty much explain my situation because when I went to get my banking account, the um the lady I talked to at the bank, she was just like, what's kind of going on here? It looks odd to a bank that you just, you're kind of not, you don't have any documentation for that long of a period, at least financially. Um, so so I had to do that. I had to get a phone because everything is tied to cell phones now. And I did have a smartphone before I went to the convent. It was a much simpler smartphone than what I have now, but I still had a smartphone. And so I had to borrow some money from my brother so I could just buy a cell phone. So when I was applying for other jobs, I had a number to give them so they could call me or to sign up for things because everything is so tied up into cell phones. You don't even realize it until you're out of that sphere of life where you don't have a cell phone, and all of a sudden it's like, oh my goodness, I need a cell phone. So that was a big adjustment. I remember using the debit card the first time that had kind of changed like where they want you to put it in and take it out right away. I wasn't used to that. Um, so sometimes I felt like almost Amish or something. There's actually kind of a funny story. This is before I got a cell phone. My brother had just gotten this really um like expensive phone, right? Um, and he was having trouble setting it up with the phone company. So he actually had to go to one of their physical locations to get this fixed. And I came along with him. And so we go and he's talking to the lady at the desk and she's working on his phone and she just about got it and she needs to send him or sorry, to make sure that the phone works, she needs someone to text him to make sure it is working now correctly. And so she turns to me and she says, can you text him just to see if the make sure the phone's working?" And I had to look at her and say, I don't have a cell phone. um, which is really strange because everyone has a cell phone anymore, for better or for worse. They have their pros and cons, but that's the kind of stuff you have to deal with. It seems weird sometimes to even say it because no, everyone has cell phone car, or they have a bank account, all those simple things that you have to have just to manage life. Um, Faith wise, I I did stick to the faith very strongly to begin with. Um, and because I had a second shift job, I was able to go to mass every day, which was a blessing because I think at that time I really needed that. I don't have the ability to do that anymore because I have to be at my work so early, um but at that time I really needed that. And uh when things started to become clearer to me on what had happened and being outside of that environment, I was able to see the wrong that was done to me. I then started to doubt my faith a little bit. And, um, I was looking at the McCarrick scandal and the McCarrick report that was supposed to be coming out, um, allegedly at that time. And I was just so sick of the scandal and everything that was going on in the church. And I really thought about leaving. I was just so sick of it. Um, and I talked to a old priest friend of mine, who became pretty much a spiritual director, and I told him how I was feeling, and he was like, I know, I understand. But you know, he said, I look at myself and I'm not Catholic because of, Father XYZ over there or sister, LMNOP over here. I'm a Catholic because of Jesus Christ. And I know that's where the truth lies. And that really hit me. And it took me a while, but I eventually started to see the light in what he was saying. And, um, and it's true. If you're going to stay in the church, it has to be because of Jesus. Because if you're staying because of this priest or this nun, or if that's where your faith is hinged, if they tumble, you're going to have a very hard time. So, um, so I would say the other thing that was kind of difficult, or at least a change, not so much difficult, but with some of the technology aspects, which I already touched on, just having my own email. I wasn't allowed to have my own email in the convent, uh, and which is kind of amazing because I know other religious and the same diocese I was in who at least allowed their sisters' information to have at least an email address. And we weren't even trusted with that. We had a communal email address, so everyone could see everyone's messages. Um, the superiors had their own email address. I did have my own email address for the diocese I was working for, but it was strictly for teaching, um, and dealing with the school I was working at. We weren't allowed to use it for anything else, and we were told that specifically. So, um, so overall, I think I was a little mm, more stubborn about what had happened, especially when I started to realize the fault of the nuns um, who were over me. And I mean, I just wanted to go as fast as I could. I remember I kind of pushed myself too much. And I had to kind of step back a few times. Um, but I didn't want to stay in a rut. And I was in a rut for, for a few months probably. I mean, I did need therapy. Um, it took me a while to find a therapist. It would have been great if I could have found one earlier, but that didn't work out. Um, but uh, I guess it was like 2 or 3 months after I left, I found a therapist, a really great one, and I was seeing her every week for a while because it was just that bad. I really needed that at that time, and um, then it started to slow down to like every few weeks, once a month, then every few months. So it did get better. And for those who are maybe just fresh out of the convent, it it just sucks. And sometimes you don't see the light at the end of the tunnel, but it's there. And it can be crushing to your spirit because you've given everything up. And it's hard because as humans we want to compare, and so comparing to your f- you know your friends who are your age, who seem to have it all, where are married now and have a house and kids, and you're starting from scratch. Yeah, it's difficult, and it's almost it's I've had moments where I'm like, God, why are you doing this to me? Like, what did I do? And that's not what it's about. And it took me a while to realize that, but it can feel extremely overwhelming. And I don't think I probably should say this a little more often, but the despite all of the issues that I've gone through in entering the convent and building my life back up, I know God has a reason for it. I don't understand why. Sometimes I really I really wish I did, because it still impacts my life. I still think about it. I do have a little bit of OCD, so those thoughts come back a lot, and it's just like, oh, just leave me alone, but it has taken me a while to get my life where it is now, and of course I want to go even farther. Um, but and I've done a lot, thanks be to God, in the a little over 2 years I've been out. Um, but you know, it can be hard just to see, you kind of contrast, and it's, but yeah, I would say there was a reason God wanted me to be in the convent. I don't understand why. I probably won't until I'm dead, but hopefully in heaven. Um, but there was a reason he wanted it, and you know, I think I did learn a lot um, about human nature, about myself, about standing up for my own needs. Um, so I think I grew personally from that because uh, you know, um, I guess I can say I'm more careful about having people say things about me or say things about what I'm doing that are negative and impacting me. If you don't like what I'm doing, that's your problem. But I know 10 years ago, if I had started a blog like this and someone had said, well, that's crazy. Why would you do that? I would be much more affected by it than I am now. So I think those kinds of things are good because I can stand up for myself more and what I know is right, after prayer, after discerning and contemplating. And I didn't make call to convent reform, in a rush. It took me about a year, if not more, to really consider what I was going to do and how I was going to do it. But I knew I had to get the word out because people are not talking about it. Even people who are in the church who mean well, who really want vocations, they're not talking about what's happening in the convents. And one of our great writers, who will remain anonymous, even mentioned that you cannot pray for vocations until you fix the convents. And she's spot on because, I mean, it's just a vicious cycle. You have women that are entering the convent and, you know, being affected by this type of behavior and leaving, and then you talk about this stuff in hushed tones. It's time to get rid of the hushed tones and to talk about this like adults. So anyway, so in that regard, I have grown. I'm not as timid as I once was in regards to my own personal opinions and that type of thing. So that's good. So, you know, God has a reason for everything, even if sometimes it sucks and we don't understand and we're confused and we're, scratching our heads like, why God did you allow this? There's a reason for it. You know, God God can see things that we can't. And, we're so limited to what we can see and understand and, you know, trust, right? Just trust, which is something I'm learning myself. So, thank you all for listening. I hope this has been um, educational or informational or whatever it has to be for you. And I look forward to talking to you next time. God bless. Bye.